Thinking about something that is in a book called Why God Won't Go Away by Eugene and Andrew Newberg. I'm thinking this thinking is coming out of other thoughts I've been having about poetics, I suppose, and cognition. I'm trying to think of just ways of opening out the ideas of poetic cognition, using some kind of analytical framework for that. And this particular book, Why God Won't Go Away, by Newberg and Dikili, might be a candidate for that for me at least. One of the features in that book, and in other bits they've written, Mystical Mind they wrote, and a few academic papers. One of the things that comes out of that writing is this concept of the cognitive operator, as they call it. And they're talking about how brain function, how the brain functions in neurological sense, how that's interpreted in terms of mental function, actual cognitive behaviours and processes, and how ultimately that produces experience and understanding. And what they identify, as I say, is a number of what they call cognitive operators, which are kind of like devices, if you like, kind of little bits of machinery in the brain, machinery in the mind, which take data, which might be sense data, might be the stuff that's pouring in through my eyes right now, or my ears, or through my fingertips, or whatever, but might also be data produced from memory, or maybe as a result of other kinds of cognitive operations. It takes data and enacts certain processes upon it, different processes, and they list somewhere between 7 and 9, I think, different cognitive operators, as they call them, in different bits of their writing. I'm just trying to remember what these cognitive operators are to see if I can use them in other ways. The ones that I'm remembering right now, and I may not be able to get all of them, is firstly the holistic operator, what they call that, which is a process in the brain by which discrete elements of data, discrete elements of sensory information are compiled and experienced as a singularity. So when I look up in the sky and I see a flock of birds, it's completely unproblematic for me to see the flock. I don't see a whole bunch of discrete birds individually and then kind of make some rational judgment as to whether I'm looking at a flock or not. The flockness of that crowd of birds immediately springs out. And in Newberg and Dikili's terms, that's because the holistic operator in my brain or mind is carrying out that compilation function. The second cognitive operator kind of works in the opposite way. I think it's called a reductive operator. And that allows me to look at something which normally would be holistic, or which could be easily seen as an entirety, like this tree I'm looking at right now. But again, completely unproblematically, I can see the branch on the tree. I can see the leaf on the branch on the tree. And if I was to get close enough, I'd be able to see the veins on the leaf, on the branch, on the tree. And in fact, I can see the tree outside of its context as part of a woodland. So what's happening there, this time under conscious control, but also, as I say, seamlessly and non-consciously, is all this data that's coming in addition to its being compiled into gestalts, into wholes, is also being decomposed at will, in fact, but also not at will, into discrete elements. Holistic, reductive. The third one is what I think is called the abstractive operator, although I might be getting the name wrong. The abstractive operator, if I remember rightly, takes data from a whole sequence or range of experiences and identifies commonalities in that experience and kind of stores the commonality, I guess, for recognition purposes. So I can see this tree, I can see this tree, I can see this tree, I can see this tree. I look all around, I can see all these trees, but what I'm not doing is experiencing each tree as different. I mean, I'm seeing them as different, but I'm seeing them all as trees. I'm recognizing them all as trees. And the reason why I think, I might say this, the reason why I'm able to recognize those things is because I have some kind of abstract understanding of what a tree is, presumably something to do with a long vertical column with spiky bits coming off it, which allows me to as I say, recognize each individual experience and compare it to this kind of abstract notion of a tree. So something schematic is being drawn out of individual experiences. Abstractive operator. So that's holistic, reductive, abstractive. They have one called a binary operator, which divides things into two. It's quite an odd one, that one. It features quite a lot in the book, Why God Won't Go Away, and they put it in as a major reason for why the functioning of these operators produces ideas like God, and why it always will. But as I said, the binary operator divides things into two. While we very, very naturally think of things in terms of binary oppositions, we don't think of good, evil, and then something else. We don't think of high, low, and then a third term, or a fourth term, or a fifth term. We think in terms of opposites. Binary, complementary, contradictory, whatever the relationship may be between those binaries. It's again completely seamless and non-conscious most of the time until we draw our awareness to it. So that's another of the cognitive operators: holistic, reductive, abstractive, binary. You see, I should have rehearsed this beforehand, really, because I've run out of steam on this. I can't remember what the other cognitive operators are. No, I can't get it. I'll have to come back to that. I suppose what I'm interested in here generally, and why I'm thinking about cognitive operators right now, is, well, several things really. Firstly, those cognitive operations are the operations which completely underpin everyday life. So my wandering along this canal path and looking around the world at trees and flocks of birds and the water in the canal and my dogs and everything, if there's any mileage in that idea, it's completely constructed by the actions of those kind of operators. And there must be something like that. If it's not those particular ones, or not quite that mechanism, it must be something like that. Because clearly I am capable of doing these things. So that's the first thing. It's natural, and it's embodied, and it's embedded. It comes out of and goes back into our experience of the world. The second thing, which is I guess where I'm getting interested in this now, is that it seems to also underpin kind of poetic or artistic experience. Certainly I've thought about some of these operators in terms of how some artworks look the way they do, or indeed why art exists at all. I mean, it seems quite odd that we have this idea of a distinction between art and everyday life, which is a classic binary distinction in many ways. It seems to be, the idea that we can take experience and divide it into two, or take pieces of writing, for example, and say this is poetry, this is not poetry, this is an art experience, this is not an art experience. It seems to me already to be the actions of some kind of binary operator. We don't have three things. We don't have art, everyday life, and then something else. We don't have poetry, ordinary writing, or prose, or whatever, and then something else. So there's something going on there. And also, if looking at some artworks, look at artworks like classical mid-20th century abstract work. Things like the Rothko or the Pollock, or going a bit further back, people like Mondrian, or all that De Stijl stuff around. It seems to me like this is classic illustrations of what an abstractive operator would look like. You take the complex forms of everyday life and you extract them down. There's a painting by Duisburg, one of the De Stijl artists, I think, from the early part of the 20th century, called Abstraction of a Cow. And it's a series of paintings, one of which looks a bit like a cow, and then the following one, it's much more blocky and simpler in colour. And by the end of the series, and there's about 4 paintings in the series, it's just kind of platonic shapes, rectangles, in primary colours. There's a kind of metaphysical abstraction going on there. And presumably in other literary forms as well as those sort of painterly forms too. I'll see if I can remember what the other cognitive operators were that Newberg and de Killy talked about, and how they might relate to poetics. I've got to be careful because my dogs have seen this crane up ahead. I don't mean the mechanical crane, I mean the bird, the crane, which we see occasionally when we walk. It's been here for years. And I'm kind of dreading the idea that one of these days my dogs will chase it and kill it. No, it's taken to flight, that's alright.